First of all, I want to say that I've never seen so many fabulous shoes in one room. And I want to do a special shout out to the woman who's wearing the green shoes, because they are absolutely fabulous. My name's Amy Smyth, actually. It's not Smith, Smyth. And I'm a principal consultant in Right Management, which is a global talent practice which specialises in careers and in assessment and development. And my first brave move of today is to have no slides. So I'm afraid you're going to be looking at me for the next 20 minutes. In Right Management, we commissioned a piece of research, which is what I'm here to talk to you about today, basically about what corporate businesses can learn from women-owned enterprises. And the reason why we got interested in this is because we were doing some research and we found out that 45% of medium to small enterprises are started by women. And what's even more inspiring, I think, is that by 2018 in the US, a third of all new jobs will be created by women-owned businesses, which I think is incredibly exciting. But when we looked at this research, it kind of got us thinking, because it made us think, why are women so successful in the entrepreneurial space? Why are they so great at starting their own business? And why are they not as successful as perhaps we'd like them to be in the corporate world? So, as a result of that, we decided to commission a piece of research, a qualitative piece of research, where we interviewed a lot of women who were very successful in the corporate world, but also a lot of women that had gone and left the corporate world to start their own business. And what we wanted to find out was, what were the things that made them leave, and what were the enabling factors that really made them successful when they went out on their own? And one of the themes that came out in our research was about bravery. And I personally work with a lot of high potential women in big corporate organisations, and one of the themes that I tend to talk about with them a lot is about bravery. And in fact, I was running a high potential programme for a big global organisation only a couple of weeks ago. And as part of this process, we put these people through their paces. They do development centres, they do career aspiration interviews, they do psychometrics, they do aptitude testing. It's the whole shebang that we're throwing at them. And part of the process is to feed back the information. And on this particular day, I had two individuals that I was seeing. One was a guy, and he'd done pretty well. He'd come midway in the table. And part of the questions I ask is, so, what's your career aspiration? Where do you want to be in this organisation? And he said to me, well, basically I want to be the next CEO. He said, George is going to have to retire, and I think that in 5 years' time I can get my career to the right place, the right time, so I can fill his shoes. I thought, that's a great aspiration. The next person I saw was a woman, and actually in this particular cohort of individuals, the women had done really brilliantly. Admittedly, there are only two of them, but they had done extremely well, and they both actually come at the top of the tree. And I sat across from this woman, and I said to her exactly the same question as I'd asked the guy. What do you want to do with your career? Where do you want to be? And she said to me, well, I really want to do a job that makes a difference. I really want to do a job that has a lot of variety. And I thought, yeah, that's all great. But I said, this programme is about developing leaders of the future. It's actually about developing board members. And she just laughed, and she said, well, I don't really see myself on the board. And I said, well, why not? And she said, well, I don't really think that I've got what it takes. And I felt like saying to her, au contraire, here's all this evidence. You've done the best out of anybody in this process, and so you absolutely are the kind of person they want as a board member. I said, why wouldn't you go for it? And she said she looked down at the table and she made her body really small. And she said, to be honest, I'm just afraid that I'm going to fail. And it really struck a chord with me. One, because it's something I hear from a lot of very high potential women in organisations. But secondly, because it reminded me of the fact that this role that I'm in now, I didn't apply for. It was available in my organisation for 8 months. I didn't apply for it because, frankly, I was scared that I was going to fail. So what it said to me was that through this experience is that there's a lot of fear in big organisations for women. They're afraid of going for the promotion, they're afraid of taking that stretch assignment, and they're often afraid of asking for what they want. Yet, these very same women do something which is extremely brave. They go and start their own business. And what, frankly, could be more brave than deciding to give up a great salary, give up promotional opportunities, give up the security of working in a big global organisation, and go out on your own? So what it said to me is it's not about bravery per se, it's not about making women more brave, it's about creating the right kind of environment where women don't feel they have to be brave. You know, they can be as successful, innovative, as creative as they want, and they can be successful in that environment, and they don't have to overcome fear in order to do it. So this was what we were looking for when we were doing this piece of research. We were looking for what are the enabling factors that allow women to succeed in one place and perhaps not be as successful as they want in the other place. How can big organisations learn from that and keep all these brave, innovative, creative women in their organisations? Because these women could well be their competitors of the future. So what we found, there were 5 main things that came out of the research. The first one was about culture. Now, you can have the greatest diversity programme ever, but if it's not implemented in the right culture, then it's frankly not going to work. And what we found when we talked to women who had their own businesses was that what they didn't like about working in corporates was that it was a very hierarchical, power residing in the top of the organisation, very individualistic, very competitive, and actually the kind of organisations that they created were much more collaborative, were much more based on networking and the power of networks. And as I was watching television last night, and I don't know if anyone saw the island, Bear Grylls Island, and they were talking about the women and the men island. And on the male island, they'd all built these individual beds that they slept in. They're all kind of their own little palace that they were in. And on the women's island, they'd created this communal bed where they all spooned together in order to keep warm. And I thought, you know, that says a lot about how women and men organise their lives. So this was one thing. So this was one piece of information. So this kind of collaborative working in small team groups was really important for women. The other thing that was really important for women-owned businesses was the idea of innovation. They felt they could be much more innovative and creative in their own business, and most importantly, they would not be penalised for failure. One woman said to me, if you fail on a project in a big corporate, frankly, your career's over. But within a small business, because innovation is basically the lifeblood of your organisation, there will be success, there will be failure, but you just pick yourself up, off you go for the next thing. Now, I work with a lot of big companies, and I haven't seen any company, frankly, that doesn't have, as part of their value proposition, the idea about working collaboratively and having teamwork, and also about innovation and creativity, because frankly, those are the things that can drive organisations forward. But what happens in big companies is that actually that's not what gets rewarded. That's not part of the pay and reward system. So our first piece of advice to organisations is to really look at the way you reward and pay your individuals. Because if you reward the natural way that women work, they're more likely to stay within your organisation and less likely to leave you. So that was the first piece of information. The second piece was really about flexible working. Now, that's not going to come as a surprise to anybody that's sitting in this room. But what was interesting about that was that the women we talked to were really big about the fact there was a lot of presenteeism in big organisations. And the person who was at their desk from 6:30 in the morning till 8:30 at night was probably the person that was thought to be working hard and was probably the person that was going to be rewarded. And in actual fact, many of these successful women just frankly couldn't run their lives like that. You know, they had other responsibilities and they wanted to be able to do the school run and then be able to work for 3 hours in the evening, and that would all be okay. So the presenteeism was a big thing that would drive people. And they particularly talked about senior roles and the fact that senior roles in organisations are very much built in a very traditional model. Long hours, a huge amount of travel, and a lot of meetings. And in fact, this was brought home to me. I was sitting with a group HR director, and he was bemoaning the fact to me that they didn't have a big enough pool of people for their divisional CEO roles. So I asked him to, describe this role to me. And to be honest, no one with a life, let alone a family, could have done that role. It had a huge amount of travel in it. But that role could have been quite different. And it's about challenging, using the technology, and Marnie mentioned how revolutionary technology has been for her, and it absolutely is, to challenge what that role looks like, to perhaps think about it in a different way, to cut out some of the travel, use more technology, and to concentrate on the things that really make that role successful. So being able to reimagine senior roles, looking really closely at job redesign, right at the top, so making sure that flexible working is not just for people who are in lower positions and middle positions, but you're actually making sure that it works for people at the top of the organisation as well. So that was our second piece of advice, is to really challenge what senior jobs look like. The third thing we looked at was how talent is identified in organisations. And this was one thing that came out from a lot of the interviews that we did with women that had left big organisations. And they were really challenging about how talent was identified. They absolutely believed that, women need to stand up, be at the table, put their hand up for assignments, but also looking at the way that organisations look for talent and looking in lots of different places and the assumptions they sometimes make about talent. And one of the things that one of our contributors said, she said, sometimes when I speak up in a meeting, I don't feel I'm heard because my voice doesn't sound like the voice of authority. So this was again brought home to me. I was talking to head of talent in an organisation. This is an organisation that frankly has got a great identification of talent programme. And we were talking about one of the criteria, which is about mobility. Mobility is one of those things that lots of big organisations want people to have, particularly people they're going to be investing a lot of money in terms of high potential development. And what was coming out of that particular organisation was that mobility was something that was really selecting out a lot of women with young families. But yet, when you were applying the same criteria to men with young families, that didn't count against them. They were just as likely to be put forward for that high potential programme as individuals that didn't have a young family. So that really said something about the assumptions that managers make, the assumptions that organisations make about women and how they want to run their lives. So the third piece of advice is really about challenging what are the criteria which organisations use to select high potentials, and really think about the unconscious bias that can be happening. And it's not just about the criteria, it's about the process that people go through. Because the process that individuals go through to be selected for these prestigious programmes, it's all about people making decisions. And at the end of the day, unconscious bias is a really big thing that can creep into the process. So that was the third thing that we looked at. The fourth one was about real models, not role models. Now you might be thinking, what does that mean? Well, role models are fantastic, and we need way more of them. We need more, senior women, absolutely, in organisations. But one of the things that came out was that a lot of role models in big organisations, women just felt, you know what, they're not like me. I see them, it's great that they're really successful, but I don't relate to them as an individual. And it was felt that women in women-owned businesses were much more honest, frankly, about the issues they had to overcome. They were much more honest about the way they had to run their businesses. They were much more honest about the fact they had to juggle millions of things in order to make their lives work. And they were proving to be much more inspirational than those women that were at the top of the corporate organisations. And this kind of resonated with me personally, because I work for an organisation who has quite a lot of senior women, which is fantastic, but we only have one senior woman who has a family. So I can't share with them my stories of having to bribe the children in the back of my car with sweets so they'll be quiet so I can have that conversation with my client. They haven't been in a situation where they're doing like this on the door because the children's trying to come in and they're working in the office. That's not something they can relate to. And as a result, sometimes other women find it hard to relate to these individuals. Mentoring was another big piece that came out, and many organisations, we set up mentoring programs within big corporates, and there are many successful ones. But what we found with women-owned businesses was that it was much more part of the DNA of their organisation. They were much more likely to mentor people that worked for them in a way that was a very kind of day-to-day activity. That's quite different to how mentoring is set up in big corporate organisations, because it's normally a very formal process where people are identified as mentors, and that's how the programme gets set up. It's not part of the day-to-day living in that organisation. So there were two things that came out for us. One was, be honest. Organisations, be honest about what it takes to get to the top and the kind of sacrifices that individuals have to make. And if women know what the kind of sacrifices they have to make, they know that sometimes it's going to be really hard, that those people that reach the top are not perfect, then at the end of the day, they're much more likely to want to reach for the top, even when they have 2 kids trying to get into their office. And the fifth piece is about career development and career advice. And for those who like TED Talks, one of my favourite TED Talks is the career advice you never got as a woman. And one of the things that's really interesting is that a lot of the women which we talked to who had gone to start their own business, they'd gone to start their own business because they weren't able to get the kind of experience that they wanted in their current organisation. And a lot of that was about P&L responsibility. It was much harder to get P&L responsibility in large organisations. But the reality is that if you want to reach a board member in an organisation, it's an absolute prerequisite for an operational role that you must have had large amounts of P&L responsibility. So this is the irony to me, is that these women are getting exactly the kind of experience they need in order to reach the top of a big organisation, but they're having to leave that organisation in order to do that. So that was one thing that we really thought that organisations could take, because I see a lot of women in leadership programmes in organisations, and there's a great emphasis in those organisations on the self. So women being able to speak up more, being more confident, being more able to sit at the table in inverted commas. There's a lot of stuff about developing leadership traits, all absolutely important. That's part of the puzzle. But less emphasis on what actually gets you promoted and what actually matters to big organisations. And that is the ability to run an efficient business and, frankly, make money. So those were the things that we felt, in terms of careers, that women should really be concentrating on as soon as possible, getting P&L responsibility. And one of our managing directors in our business, a woman called Jane Carrington, she mentioned that a watershed moment for her was when she worked in a very small business and she was able to work alongside the finance director, and she was able to really understand the numbers. And that was the experience that propelled her into a managing directorship in our business. So the fifth thing is really making sure that women in your organisation have as much P&L responsibility as quickly as possible as they can do. So those are the 5 things. So to recap, it's about culture. It's about creating a level playing field with talent. It's about creating real models, not role models. It's about creating a flexible workplace, not only at the bottom and the middle, but right at the top as well. And it's about getting the right career advice. Now, what you'll notice, and certainly what I noticed, was that those 5 things have got nothing to do with changing women. That is not about making women any different than what they are today. It's not about making them change the way they act, the way they speak, speaking up more in meetings. Because frankly, we've been doing that for nigh on 10 years now, and that really hasn't worked. In fact, if we go at the same pace we're going now, it's going to be 87 years before we reach gender parity. And that is profoundly depressing, because my daughter will be dead before that happens, or she'll at least be retired. So if I leave you with any message today, it is about, let's stop trying to change women, and let's really start and change organisations. Thanks very much.